Hey everyone, welcome to Alumless. Thank you for listening. Today is Friday, July 19th, 2024, and this is the Reviewing Annual Giving Strategies Edition. I'm Ryan Catherwood. I am joined by CMAC founder and CEO Chris Marshall. On the show, we talk about engagement strategies in advancement. We are live today, so please chime in with a question or comment in the LinkedIn event and be sure to say hello and where you're tuning in from. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast edition of Alumless and hear our 30-minute bonus segment with today's guest, Howard Heevner, Executive Director of Annual Programs at Cal Berkeley. We're incredibly grateful for Howard joining us today. Before we get started, I want to make sure we mention our fantastic presenting sponsor, Protopia. Protopia has created a transformational AI-powered technology that matches questions from students or recent graduates with alumni all over the world that are perfectly positioned to answer them without asking alumni to be mentors or participate in a program spread out over months or sign up for an app or a platform. Protopia makes scaling introductions simple. Questions get submitted through and Protopia's AI does all the work. Protopia can even target stakeholders like young alumni or lapsed donors and provide them with a meaningful volunteer experience. Visit protopia.co/alumless for more details, and be sure to check out the solution that schools like Duke, Denison, Florida State, and the London School of Economics are using to make their alumni networks available for everyone. Chris, what's going on, sir?
Hey
Good to
man,
see you.
how you doing?
Happy
Good to see you.
Friday.
Yeah, man, it's been a busy, crazy week for both of us travel wise. So I'm glad to be home.
Yeah, I was in El Paso this week. You were in, let's see, DC. I know that. And you were also, where else were you this week?
High Point, North Carolina.
That's right, High Point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a busy world, but we're excited to have the chance to chat with Howard Heevner and then reconnect again on Sunday for the CASE Summit for
Yeah.
Advancement Leaders in New York City, where we are going to have our own live show on Monday morning for both a live audience and a virtual audience. But I guess I wanted to ask you, sort of as we're getting going, how do you think about big conferences like Case Summit in terms of how you spend your time? And maybe this conference particularly, right, is a little bit different in that I feel like there's more of an emphasis on networking at Case
Yeah.
Summit versus maybe some of the others. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I agree with you. I agree. Before I go there, we have a few folks who weighed in, said hello. Good to see you, Patrick and Al on there. But I know there's others. We had almost 40 people signed up for this. So let us know you're here. Say hi to Howard, who's going to be joining us in about a minute. We'd love to have people chat in. And we have someone from the CMAC team who will respond to any questions that come up as well. So back to your question though, Ryan, the Case Summit. When I was in a role, Case Summit was mostly networking and content for me. I wanted to go and learn. Now, as a on the dark side of in the for-profit consulting world, it is 90% consult or networking for me. Getting in front of people, and you and I joked about last year. We each had something like 50 some odd bump-in meetings that we had scheduled in advance, and work in the room during the marketplace breaks and in between sessions. That's the majority of it for me. There's still good content. I mean, I have to say, last year's I went to several breakout sessions that were quite good, but the plenary, the keynote sessions were phenomenal. They had really great speakers last year. And there's always a little bit for me, Ryan. I think you know this about me now, is that it's a little bit about the food. Like we're going to go out to a couple of nice dinners when we're in town, including
Yeah.
Sunday night, our staff team dinner, and with a few clients joining us at Nobu 57, my favorite restaurant in New York City. So we'll be doing that Sunday night.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I remember you took me there for the first time last year at Case Summit. And yeah, I kind of concur with your thinking about the summit in terms of, yeah, it's a lot of great content. Matter of fact, I saw Anne Applebaum, the journalist, is going to be doing one of the
Yep.
keynotes, and she's a really interesting person with a great worldwide perspective. But one of the special sort of announcements that we've got for today, there are a couple, is that I mentioned it already, is that we're going to be doing a live show on Monday. So you got us today, Friday, and then again on Monday morning on the main stage at Case Summit. It's going to be from 10 to 11 a.m., which is hugely exciting. maybe just sort of make a little advanced promo for us, Chris. What
Yeah.
can listeners be expecting?
Well, huge thank you to Washburn McGoldrick. As many folks know, our partner company, Washburn McGoldrick, Bonnie Devlin and Carla, well as the principals and owners of the firm, worked out this arrangement so we can do the live broadcast from the main stage on Monday morning before the conference gets rolling. But we'll be live with Bonnie and Carla, Ryan and I. We'll be bringing in 3 guests live in the morning. Matthew Lambert from William and Mary. Many folks know Matthew's been a guest on our show. He's fantastic. Vice President for Advancement. Josh Harriman from Ohio State, formerly at Rutgers University. But Josh was on the planning committee for the Case Summit. He's going to join us, talk about his work at Ohio State, but also about planning a Case Summit. What's that like? And then, Ryan, you were able to arrange for relatively new in her current role, 7 months in, but Amy Yancey at UConn Foundation is another superstar who's thinking, about the world through the foundation lens now. We'll be having her on as well. So those are the 3. I think I got them all right. Those are all our live guests. And then later in the afternoon, won't be live, but we'll package it in with the podcast version of it. We're bringing in Sue Cunningham, the president and CEO of Case itself, and she's going to join us about what it's like to be the big boss running a major summit of that magnitude that they're doing in New York over the next couple of days. So it'll be fun to have her give her thoughts as well.
Yeah, it's like to have those guests join us. I mean, I know Sue Cunningham literally is scheduled by the minute.
Yeah. I think we have 8 minutes with her, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
See, we can extend the 8 to 15 and get a couple extra questions in there. But exactly. So we're grateful for the Case team, for Washburn Goldrick, for our presenting sponsors, Protopia and Gibbsy, and our special guests. So that's going to be really fun for us on Monday morning at first for this little podcast, Alumless, we started a couple years ago. So really exciting. But all right, let's bring out Howard Heevner to the show and talk about annual giving, annual programs, giving days, and everything. Hey, Howard, how's it going?
Good morning. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Before we get started, I have to say I'll be at Summit as well. But Monday afternoon, there's an AI session with some of the smartest people that I know. Heather Kopik from Rice, Christy Moss from University of Illinois, and of course, Jenny Cook-Smith from Case. And so if people are at the Summit, they should absolutely make it to AI. It's here. We need to learn how to maximize it. And these are the people who know how to do it. So anyway, I just was listening to the intro and I was like, I got to promo my friends who are
plug. I love the plug.
Work. Yeah, you're going to fit right in here with the
they're
plugs,
super smart.
Yeah.
They're so those 3 are 3 of the smartest people, and Heather and Christy understand this AI stuff and how to integrate it into our work better than anybody I've met in the country. And I'm just I'm excited for it, and I've heard their shtick, so it's great.
I'm going to add it to my list.
Well, let's kick the conversation off, Howard, with sort of a big question, right? We wanted to talk about annual giving today, and let's broad view. What are some of the systemic challenges that are facing today's annual giving leaders?
Feeling successful. No, 20 years of declining donor trends across the entire industry, just to start with, right? If you go and look at just the Case 50 institutions across a decade, they've seen almost a 16% decline in donor count. And then you look at, there was an article in Vox last week that was talking about, individual giving across the nation at nonprofits and et cetera. And they saw the same trend since 2008. Just this massive, we're seeing bigger gifts than ever, but we're losing donor count rapidly, and it's only been amplified since the pandemic. So the question, or the thing, and the trend is the question we're trying to answer is, what is our value? Like, what do we mean? It's kind of almost like this existential crisis moment for people who are in this kind of mass marketing field. If our main metric's not donor count, then what is our metric, right? And so I think that's kind of the big question that we have to, I know I'm wrestling with, and I know others are wrestling with right now.
Yeah, man, it's a challenging world out there, and there's so many reasons. And I think we referenced the generosity crisis, great book by Nathan Chappell. I think that was during our last show. But to your point, I think there's a ton of systemic challenges going on. One of the questions I wanted to ask you sort of at the onset here was, how do you think fundraisers can better connect with their audiences, in particular those rising generations, where if it feels like the giving is kind of on the decline, is it the rising generations that are those that are directly responsible for that decline?
Well, let's be clear. We're responsible for that decline. We as higher education. The alumni are doing what alumni do. They're giving places. So many of the alumni, the research we just did this last year showed that 54% of alumni who are not giving to their alma mater are giving to other nonprofits. And for years, we as higher education would say things like, we have to teach them to give, right? We would take this very kind of approach, like we have to teach them to give. The reality is they know how to give. We have to learn to listen, and then reflect that listening back to them, right? That we're actually hearing them and we actually care, regardless of the level of their gift, regardless of where they're coming in or whether they're just engaging and giving time. We have to be able to reflect that we value the relationship. And I think for people who are, I think that alumni relations and alumni engagement world has gotten is the core of what that is in a lot of ways, right? Is that kind of relating and listening and kind of being there. And I think the major gift end of it, we've also like, that's the nature of major gifts, right? You sit down and you have this in-depth conversation. But for that pipeline, that middle, what happens between alumni engagement and happens between major gifts, the world I have lived in for 20, almost 7 years at this point, we've done a really poor job at that. And we have to use technology and be thoughtful about how do we get there. And so really looking for opportunities to listen better and reflect back that listening to our populations is the main thing I would think about.
Yeah, Howard, the research that you're referencing is the study that you did with Russell Noel Levitt's RNL, and you were the sort of the author, wrote the preface, wrote the follow-up, the summary at the end.
Yeah.
It is a fun. First of all, if you're in the annual giving, even alumni advancement space in general, you should get that document. And Howard, let's be clear. What would you Google to find it? It's the RNL. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it's the 2024 RNL National Alumni Survey. And so it's on their site. You can download it. It's also all over my LinkedIn. Just perusing.
Post it online too.
And yeah, they actually just reposted the blog I wrote about it on the AGB LinkedIn. Just reposted that as well. So there's a number of places where you can go to track that down. And if you all, I know you have some announcements today, but I'd like to take this moment. We're going to talk about this for a second and just make my super exciting announcement. Is RNL has agreed again to offer the National Alumni Survey for free to schools across the country. I know Chris and Ryan have been so generous that they're going to share that link as well at the end of the session with everyone.
In the chat right now, already in the chat. Kim's on it.
Yeah, she's on it.
Kim.
Well, we want to get to. My co-author in all this is Sarah Kleberger with RNL, who is a remarkable human being and very patient with all the things me. And she has a very when I say this, she will actually yell at me later, but that's cool. I want to get to 50,000 respondents. I want to get 30, 40 schools in this, and I want to get 50,000 respondents. Last year we had 20,000. If we can get enough schools in to get to 50,000 respondents across the country, we really then are getting to some real in-depth understanding of what's happening in society when it comes into that relationship with your alma mater. And I think that lack of information is what we're suffering from a lot of times.
Yeah.
So
Kim, our great colleague Kim Infante at Syracuse, works with us at CMAC, has put in the chat 2 links. And for those that are listening to the podcast, we'll make sure these links get put in the description so you can click on them there as well. But the first link is a link to the study, the RNL 2024 survey. So please check that out, read it, and we'll come back to one follow-up question on that for you, Howard. But the second link that got put in is a link to sign up to participate in that second round. It will be the 2025 survey or 20.
Yep. We're signing up people through we're signing up schools through this summer, through the 1st of September, basically, or 9th of September. And you get from that, when you sign up, right, what RNL will do is we'll use your data and survey your alumni population and return to you the individual level respondents plus a summary report, and then you'll be part of the national search. So this is, to me, them offering this is like, I was a little surprised that they went for it twice. I was like, come on, guys, let's do it one more time. And then I'm really hopeful on the delivery side of it. I'm actually trying to work with them. They've got some really great new reporting tools. I'm trying to convince them it'd be a great idea to offer the reporting tool for free to everyone who signs up to be able to have that survey data be more dynamic.
Yeah.
So instead of just doing a flat file, because so many people struggle with reporting tools. And so I think they're going to be on board, but fingers crossed that they feel like that they can make that investment, because it's a
Yeah.
heavy investment. I mean, they're
So
investing a
again,
fair amount in this.
2 links in the chat. First link is the link to the 24 survey that has been authored, and the second link is to join in and participate in the next survey coming up later this fall. So Howard, back to it. You're on the elevator with with a VP for advancement at Cal Berkeley. She says to you, Howard, what's the main takeaway? And you have 30 seconds from your R&L research work. What's your main takeaway?
Um, so I had that conversation, and the main takeaway for me is this kind of idea about using technology to listen better, that we have to invest in our technology infrastructure. We have to really quickly get our hands around the utilization of machine learning models and generative AI tools in order to be able to do the listening and reflect that listening. And that reflection is actually, I think, a really important part. I think we've been listening. We've got all the data. Like, we've got clicks and we've got links, and they've been telling us for years what they care about. We can't organize it and then utilize it in a way that is impactful to them. And so I'm asking her for investment in IT infrastructure to meet a changing space.
Yeah, the boil down for me on this is, and I say this about my own alma mater, I want my alma mater to talk to me like they know me. And then I'm going to give them more. That's what it boils down to for me.
Well, Chris, we want them to talk to you like they know you today.
Right, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
I keep waiting for my alma mater to notice that I give every month, and that gift has increased every year. And I don't get the sense that they've noticed that. And I think there's a lot of people out there that kind of feel the same way. And, it's definitely, like, to your point, I think it's the reason, right? People are like, is it really, like, doesn't make me feel that good,
I'm a perpetrator of the system. Like, listen, I have worked at Penn State, Michigan. I work at Berkeley, right? Like, I've sent like millions of pieces of direct mail. I have overseen hundreds of thousands of phone calls. I have I am a giant offender of the broken system. And then the truth is that, to your point, right? Like, so one of the exercises I do when I started talking about this is I would say, like, write down the 5 things you cared about when you graduated college. Right now, write down the 5 things you care about today. What is the crossover?
Yep.
And so right, like, maybe one thing, right? And so I did that with Dean one time, and she was so wonderful. She was like, "Oh, that is not good." I'm like, "Right," but we continue to act as if who they were as students is who they are now, and we don't reflect their evolution. We don't reflect the intersectionality of how they exist. And so it is, to me, as part of the challenge we have to face is and it's like, right, it's also the thing is, like, it's the momentum of the structure that we're working against, because these are big gifts, right? If these are big gifts, you put the money in fast, right? Like, I've got to change, but because these are the gifts, these are impact things in 10 years from now, right? Like, it's a little harder to kind of create the urgency to get the change made. And so that's why we're doing the survey, in part.
Great stuff, Howard. Thank you for your leadership on that too. It's wonderful.
Howard, what do you see as some of the keys to providing more personalized giving opportunities, messaging to donors, no matter what the giving level?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so first of all, Ryan, I'm going to warn you. This is one of those things where, like, you asked a question, and I told him earlier, like, I'll sometimes answer the question.
Okay, that's cool. You warned me in advance.
Answer totally different. But it'll get there. It'll get there. So if you think back 15 years ago and sitting in these rooms, and there's all these presentations about the millennials are coming, we have to change everything. They're going to change everything, and the millennials are coming, and then we didn't do anything. Like, literally, we started giving days. Congratulations. Let's have a round of applause. That's really cool. But we didn't change anything else. We're still asking for the same funds or the same tools. We've incorporated some fancy digital printing stuff, but we really haven't evolved the tools we use or the method. But the big change is the digital space, is crowdfunding, it's giving days. And what is, if you are a school who is currently just taking your traditional annual fund and dumping it on a platform and having a giving day, you're not going to gain the opportunity that you can if you actually just kind of let go of the control. Let the students get in there. Let the volunteers get in there. Let them put up what they care about. Utilize those networks, right? Because that's what we have to do, is we have to basically deputize our alums to campaign for what they care about. Deputize the students to reach out to recent grads, because those recent grads aren't opening your email.
Yep.
But they'll take that text message on that one day and make a gift. We've seen a massive growth in new donors. In fact, I think in 2020 fiscal year 2024, our largest source of new donors on campus at Berkeley, I believe, was our digital program, our Giving Day Big Give, which was 5 years ago. Was definitely not the case. It was all phone program, and that is happening around the country. And so utilizing that space where you can connect people where they are versus where you are, and not just being so tied to, and I know it's easy for me to say because institutional leadership wants that unrestricted dollar. Do the math. The unrestricted dollars not coming from your $25 donors. They're coming from your $1,000 to $100,000 donors. That's where the growth is coming unrestricted. The under $1,000 folks, the new folks, like, let them give where they want. It's going to be better. It's going to be the better path. So
One of the
I kind of got there.
questions that
I kind of got there.
yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the questions I know you wanted to talk about in our prep was the
Yeah.
makeup. How do you know when you have a diverse and healthy pipeline? And so I thought, let's pose it to you. And I know you wanted to hear, from Chris, certainly, about his thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, I want to hear. Actually, here's the deal. I want to. Anyone I talk to, I'm asking this question to right now. It's like, how do you know you have a healthy pipeline? So I think the concept of annual giving, I think we might be, not to predict the demise of anything, but I think we've kind of peaked annual giving. One, it's no longer annual. Everybody's strategy everyone's strategy should be about multiple times a year giving. It has if you increase the number of times a donor gives in a single year, the retention rate of that donor increases by almost 20 percentage points, not percent. And you see a 10 to 15% rise in the average per transaction if you get the people to give multiple times, right? So if you're just doing annual, you gotta switch over anyway, right? But it's really also thinking about, again, this kind of value proposition of what are we doing now, right? If we're not chasing donor count, like, what are we doing? And so starting to think about how do you measure a healthy pipeline has been this kind of like mini obsession of mine for a minute. And I have asked this question of no less than 60 people at this point. I've asked it of VPs, I've asked it of alumni relations people, I've asked it of people who are kind of pipeline authorities. And the answers are like literally everywhere. And a good portion of people are still using a lot of the traditional measurements of that, right? Like they're saying retention rate and things like that. And that's cool. But I don't know if that's right. And so what I'm working on, or we're trying to figure out here, is how do you measure trajectory? How do you measure acceleration? How do you measure? So we have two measurements that one that's active and one that we're working on finalizing. And the first one is a donor escalation score, which is looking at donors giving in the current year versus their highest giving in the past 3 years. So are they moving, right? Are they moving up in levels? And then the second, and it's a little dicier, is to figure out, not surprisingly, right, is a engagement escalation score. Are they increasing the level of engagement they have with us? And so, because we're feeling like those two measurements might give us a sense of movement in a pipeline. So, so now, of course, as you previewed, right, I'd be interested from you all, having spoken to as many schools, right? This week, Chris was like in 22 places, and you were in like a half dozen, right? So, like, what do you guys think? Like, how would you, particularly as experts in the field of alumni, how would you tell someone to measure the health of their pipeline, or how do you feel like that you would want to measure that?
I'm a numbers guy. I'm a dashboard scoreboard guy. I spent many years coaching to not have something, and I love what the case metrics, what Jenny Cook-Smith and the whole case group has done on this. You mentioned it in your second part of your answer. For me, if you assume that there's correlation between communications, meaningful communications, event attendance, experiential, and volunteerism, to me, the indicator of a strong donor pipeline is going to be your numbers. Your communication numbers are going up, your experiential numbers, your volunteer numbers are going up. So when you start to see those percentages increasing, now I granted, I do know that anybody's on the metrics journey, their numbers improve year over year in the first couple of years because they're better at counting.
Just tracking. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You get through that 3-year hump, right? In year 3 or 4, now you start to see, when you start to turn the dials and push certain buttons, those numbers will increase. That, to me, is going to be our sign as an industry that our pipeline is going to be healthier, because we're seeing other actions, behaviors that are going to indicate interest down the road and from a donor behavior standpoint. Ryan?
Yeah, just a couple quick thoughts. I mean, I think one of them is a philosophical question. There's a couple of barriers that can prevent a healthy pipeline. One of them is, if you have an alumni leader who does not think of themselves as part of the fundraising team, right? Like that they're doing something different over here, then that's a barrier, right? If you are not sending out communications, email communications that are about giving something to your stakeholders, right? That you're providing them valuable content to interact with. That allows you to do more soliciting. I think that allows you to send more fundraising emails if you're not always asking. I think a lot of schools are ask heavy in their communications rather than providing. And I think another thing, we could spend a whole long time, we could do a marathon on donor pipeline, but another one is no matter where alumni live, no matter how much time they have, do you have a volunteer opportunity for them that's meaningful? And are you moving strategically people that are engaged in communications and coming out to events into those opportunities in a strategic way? So I think there's a lot of considerations there for how to make sure the pipeline is healthy and what are the attributes that are associated with it.
So one more stat from the report that I think that would be particularly interested to your kind of more alumni focused audience, right, is that when we surveyed those folks, those 20,000 people, those that were not volunteering with their alma mater, 60% said they were volunteering someplace else. So there is also this crisis of we are not offering the right type of volunteer opportunities, right? We continue to be fixed in our very higher ed ivory tower space of, well, when you volunteer with us, that's a lifelong commitment and you're going to volunteer for 15 years, and instead it needs to become micro engagement.
It's
right?
a sentence,
like
not an
think
opportunity, right?
Yeah, right. And particularly the rising generations. And I think the other thing we talk about, like kind of the rising generations, the thing we have to think about is we have this a massively diversifying alumni population. Like when Q was still doing generational data, they stopped using the term generations, but quite frankly, our ethnicity data at almost every institution is terrible. So we have to use generations in a way of a proxy to represent like that change, right? And so when you look at it from a generational perspective and from a gender identity perspective, what I'm seeing is female identifying alumni respond better to digital strategies and more poorly to traditional annual fund strategies and male identifying. We see that, and I have just, my mind is blown by this, that millennials are not direct mail responsive at Berkeley. So same audience definition, compare them to Gen X, and the response rate is like 1/4 or one third of the response rate to that of the Gen X, just the Gen X population. Not even compare it to boomers who are like dramatically, right? Like we have to start looking at our data and performance through these lenses of demographics instead of just they went to liberal arts, LNS, and they have a psychology degree, and like everybody else has a psychology degree, and so we're going to ask them for psychology 22,000 times. Like we have to stop putting them in those artificial buckets and start paying attention to things that align with identity and interest, and viewing our outcomes in that, so we have a clearer picture of what we need to do to be better.
Yep.
All right, Chris, we're bumping up against the top of the hour, but we have a big announcement to share that Howard is joining CMAC.
He is.
One of
He's
our
not leaving
friends.
Cal Berkeley. Nobody worry about that.
No.
This will be a side
Particularly
hustle.
my boss. I am not going anywhere. Yeah.
Along with Adam Compton at NC State, and they're going to be helping us build out our consulting practice in this area of not annual giving programs of all the time.
You got to come up with a name for this, Howard.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, sorry. No, I mean, question is first to Chris, a few words about this new partnership, and then over to you, Howard, a few words from you.
So if you don't know, in my opinion, the two biggest names in this space, there's a lot of really smart thought leader people out there, but two of the big ones on my Mount Rushmore would be Howard Heevner and Adam at Cal Berkeley and Adam Compton at NC State. Two of our, I would describe them as, they're not rising stars, they're stars. They've arrived, right? And they are leading the space in this thinking around annual or regular or whatever we want to end up calling this, consistent giving. Maybe that's the terminology, but also the day of giving work that's been going on. I think there's lots of, in fact, what I would describe them as two great leaders, two great guys, first of all, too. And the other thing I will say is that these are the areas I hear most about from our clients. We get into the alumni work, it immediately blends into the other development side of it. And of course, the first step in that is on the annual side. And we hear this a ton. How can you help us with these numbers, these challenges we're facing? And our answer is going to be, well, here's Howard and here's Adam. So Howard, what's your thinking about this new partnership and what do you hope for the future?
Yeah, what I hope for the future is so many things. No, I guess I would start with, right, like, well, first, thank you, Chris, and thanks, Ryan, for the warm welcome and for being so inviting and for, just even being willing to partner. Um, I try not to say too many nice things about Adam because I don't want it to go to his head. He's still
I think he's on right now, so you could just whisper something maybe.
but one of the smartest and most thoughtful professionals in the space in the country right now to me is Adam. I don't know how, like, he sends me stuff all the time, and I'm like, when do you have? He has a couple children, and like he's got a full-time job, and all of a sudden he's sending me like 4 articles from Adam about something, and I'm like, how? Why? Like, where did you have the time to do this? Like, so just a great brain, and a pretty decent human being too. I'll give him that. But he also Adam always calls me old at every single conference I speak at. He asks a question, has always called me old. So I just want to warn people about that. Like, watch that content. Anyway,
he's a young,
but
that's his problem.
he is. He is. He might be on the rising star side, and I might be on the back end of this stuff. Yeah, but the reality is the question of pipeline and our success in pipeline is not going to be something we figure out by sitting in traditional silos and plunking away at a whiteboard and a computer and with a small team of people, right? It's going to take collaboration and holistic relationships. And so partnering with experts like you in the space of alumni and really thinking about innovative ways and ways to encourage people to think differently about this work, to grow their pipelines, it's going to take that type of collaboration to come up with really strong solutions. And so for me, when this came up and Chris and I started talking about this, I was like, this makes a ton of sense because it isn't going to be like it, like just like when they talk about in the academic side, right? There's no problems in the world now that one specialty can solve, right? And it's the same thing with this. Whatever this is going to look like, it has to be this collaborative. It has to be viewed from a bunch of different angles, and it has to be kind of a holistic view. And so, to be able to work with like really lovely human beings who are super smart on this as part of the things I do, when I'm not just doing all I can for Berkeley to be successful, was a no-brainer to me. And I'm excited to get to know your client base and to help folks as I can. And I'm excited to share more of the work that I'm also doing on this survey work, because I think that I'm also looking for a partner who is interested in that too, and excited about that work as well. So so super exciting, and I can't wait to meet folks and just partner whatever way makes sense.
Can't wait,
awesome,
man.
Well, we're going to pick up the conversation with Howard in our bonus segment, which can pick up on the podcast edition. But thanks, Howard. That was awesome. For listeners, be sure to join us on Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern time for our live show from Case. And we'll see you on the flip side of the weekend. So thanks, everybody, for listening.
Real quick, 2 weeks from today will be Matt Brandon from William & Mary, who's going to be talking about their really cool alumni program. He's their new, 2-year in alumni leader, and they talk about time, talent, treasure, but ties, testimony, and trust. They got 6 T's at William & Mary. Stay tuned for that.
All the T's. All right. Back with you guys on Monday. And thanks to Howard. Chris, see you guys in just a few minutes for the bonus segment. Bye.
Thank you, Howard.
Great. Thanks all. Appreciate it.
Hey, listeners. Chris and I were going to record an ad discussing all the great aspects of Protopia, of which there are many, but instead we thought it would be even better to hear from one of Protopia's current partners. Here's Sally Sistar, Executive Director of Alumni Engagement at Denison University, talking about her experience with the technology. If you like what you hear, be sure to go to protopia.co/alumless and check it out. How do you see Protopia fitting into your plans? You mentioned a few ways that I might imagine it fitting in, but what do you think?
It's a tremendous fit. Listen, I cannot tell you how excited I was when I took this job to know that they already had Protopia, right? It's a very, very smart decision. Because one, it just, with the AI technology enabled, like it takes us out of the equation, right? It is really a great tool for alumni and students to ask those questions and be connected to, the top experts, right, or the top individuals to answer those questions for them. What I've been really excited to hear about here at Denison is, if that question goes to 5 alumni, well, all 5 of our graduates are answering. And then it gets into, a train of communications between them and the individual asking the question. So it's really facilitating community for us in a way that we couldn't do that ourselves if we were at the helm of trying to, facilitate someone's question going to those individuals, right? It's automatic, and that's the beauty of it. The other thing I would say to you is that it's bringing people into, it's engaging alumni that may not have engaged with us in any other way, right? But they really are appreciative that, they get an opportunity to help another alumni member or help a student. So I can't say enough great things about what a difference maker that has been for us on the engagement level.
All right, welcome back. Thank you so much for being a listener of our podcast edition of Alumless, making us part of your routine. We had a great live show announcing Howard Heevner and Adam Compton and joining the CMAC team to help us with our giving program practice area. And, Howard, last year we got the CASE Summit coming up here this week. And it was actually at the last summit where they announced that U.S. News and World Report was dropping the alumni giving rate as one of the key metrics they use to rank universities. And a lot of schools had really built an infrastructure around sort of that particular metric. And I wanted to ask you now, a year later, what do you think the impact has been of that change?
I think there's there's such a spectrum of reactions to that, right? So for a program like mine, or even me as a professional, where I wouldn't have taken a job that was focused on alumni participation rate, I wouldn't have, because I think it was an absurd metric that didn't make sense, that was developed to compare apples and oranges between 2 institutions. Not that I have a strong opinion, but I think that the schools that were really geared to that, right, I've gone through really this kind of questioning process of, again, kind of this idea of what's the value proposition, and I think the good news is we're all in that space of asking what the value proposition is right now. And you have schools who have done a lot of things, and people who know me well know I have strong feelings about marketing of stuff, and I'm not a marketer of stuff, but other schools are having success and building their donor count by, quite frankly, selling socks, right? That is, but the question I have for them, and I don't know that they are answering, or maybe they're not even addressing it, right, is to what point? If we're not tracing donor count anymore, and donor count isn't actually, you're not going to be successful in chasing donor count anyway because of the national trends, right? We're in this different space. Then what is the value proposition? What is it that you offer the institution beyond a churn and a representation that isn't really representative, right? And so you just have seen over time people do so many terrible things to alumni populations in the honor of driving donor count up for the purpose of participation. I could list the schools, but there are a couple of them that got famous for it, unfortunately.
I've definitely heard a few people kind of complain of the give to get dynamic, and it's sort of just a fake philanthropy, but the numbers, right? But the numbers and the donor count. We talk often at CMAC about integrated advancement, right? We really are sort of help our schools think about how all these pieces fit together. And often we work with schools that are thinking about or in the process of an organizational alignment that has the alumni engagement and annual giving teams merged together under one leader. What are your thoughts on that alignment? Is it the right one? I mean, when might it be versus when shouldn't it be?
Sure. So I took that job at one point when I went to UC Santa Cruz. My job was to combine those two shops. And what I did a lot of things wrong, and I learned that. And which is, isn't that all things,
It
right?
happens, right?
Yeah. So I think that Cornell's model now is probably or some aspects of the Cornell model. They have combined some parts of communications and marketing, and they have like leadership giving, and they have like a traditional annual giving shop, and they're not the buckets aren't annual giving and alumni, right? The buckets are based on more kind of specialty than that kind of traditional buckets. What I found when I had an alumni relations director versus an annual giving director is it was still competitive. It was still who's getting the resources, who's like whatever, and there wasn't as much collaboration just by having them under one leader, no matter what I did, right? And so I think that, for me, if I were to do that again, it would be really rethinking that concept. And you have to have a chief alumni officer. Most institutions need that role, right? But what you need when you think about combining those two shops is you need a more integrated model, a model where you break down those silos, right? And so you have somebody who's doing direct marketing, and you have someone who's doing volunteer management, and you have someone, and so you're doing these things that they are not just like in my little silo of volunteer engagement for philanthropic volunteers or for engagement purposes.
Having this side, that side, even if it's under one leader, like that's not the right fix, right?
That doesn't count.
Yeah.
That doesn't count.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so, and I learned it the hard way. I I did all kinds of things where I tried to how do we have shared goals and et cetera. And really, I think ultimately what I needed to do is just dismantle the whole thing and start over. And, you just learn. But yeah, so that would be, so whether it's right or not for an institution just depends on their resources and depends on the questions they're trying to answer, right? I think the future, if we think about a more inclusive philanthropic culture where when I say inclusive philanthropic, it means that we are really honoring people for not only their financial support, but also for their gifts of time and talent. And counting those like we count gifts, right? You kind of get in fast space, and then an integrated model makes sense. If you continue to keep them separate, it may not make as much sense, but it just depends on the goals and what they're trying to accomplish.
He's already a consultant, Ryan. He already knows how to say it. It depends.
He's already
all depends.
Depends line sort of. I heard that in there somewhere, right?
I've been around for a while.
We talked a little bit in the first half about technology and innovation and how we were really and that was at the core of the R&L report, right? Which is we're not doing a particularly good job in innovating and using technology and reaching people where they are with personalized communications. And I guess I wanted to sort of a two-part question here is what technological innovations have been effective in helping, if you can point towards any, and then a lot of schools that we work with, some of the more advanced schools are using tools like Salesforce Marketing Cloud, Oracle's Eloqua tool, right? To really think about donor journeys in a more effective way where, you have schools that are trying to make sure that just like when you order a pair of your favorite socks, right? That you're, getting the communications. If you've not ordered them, you left them in the cart, right? Or after you've made the order that they're saying, you may want this other thing, these other socks in a different color, right? Or get on our mailing list because we know you like socks and you want to know what color's coming next, right? There's just a way of getting people involved in the donor journey, and there's always a next.
Yeah.
So I guess talk a little bit about some of the technology innovations that have come out there. And then in your mind, what is the crawl, walk, run, fly look like as teams are sort of developing their prowess in what we're describing donor journey development?
Wait, how much time do we have? Okay, so here's the thing. That's a massive question, right? So at first, let's say, right, people need to first look at the tools they already have and how are they maximizing those, right? almost anybody has Marketing Cloud is likely not maximizing it, because it is a very complex. We do some donor journeys to varying success, and the data work alone, right, and the conditioning, and particularly you get into the multiverse of an institution, and what funds are you including? Are you not including? And is this an appropriate fund for this first time donor journey or not? What's the gift? All these things kind of get into it. So the first thing I'd say from the technology space is looking at all the tools you have and are you maximizing them? And I can tell you we're not, because that takes time, right? And it takes human capital to do that. And also you have to navigate things like some of the things you're talking about, Ryan, is like, can you plant pixels on your online giving form so that when someone leaves your site that you follow them around the internet and remind them that they were starting to make a gift? There's huge resistance to that in a lot of institutions, at least the institutions I've been to, because it feels creepy. And it's like we want to be Amazon without the Amazon creepiness, right? But at the same time, we're competing with Amazon for brain space and expectations. And so, but we kind of talk about this. There was like 4 or 5 phases in that kind of evolution of man, kind of explanation of technology. And I would say that, your first step in any situation is, what do you have? Are you maximizing it? And then to identify what you're just aligning to your goals, right? Like, what goals do you have? Okay, then what tools could you use that would get you there? Because then it's about resource. Do you have the IT resources? Can you actually afford the product, right? And I love our vendor friends, but too often they get a little excited about that you should try our thing, but not understanding the morass that is the IT structure of higher education, and the rules around the data management, et cetera. And so being really thoughtful about who your partners are, because the partners really make you in the IT space when it comes to kind of taking advantage of technology, like really thoughtful and really inquisitive. One of the things I require if we're picking a new tool for me is I want them to bring an engineer. I don't want to talk to the salesperson. I want to talk to an engineer. And I want them to talk to me about the kind of like, what is the plan? Like, what is the roadmap? So those are just some things to think about. Maximize what you have, identify what space you want to grow into, and don't try to do it all at once, because it is time consuming. It can save you time in the end, but you got to start where you're at. So
What if you had to guess at what project out forward, or what the run and the fly might look like down the road for a more
okay,
sophisticated shop? What would that look like, Howard?
I can tell you my vision. The thing I'm pitching on my campus is, so I want us to, and I think we're going to put a data lake in as our data warehouse for Berkeley, right? And those who don't know, a data lake is the dumbed down version, right? Is basically a database that is kind of unstructured, and we're all like these little magnets floating in the lake, and that lake is data, right? And all the data about us is attracted to our magnet. And so now you have this massive data attached to your little magnet, but there's no organization to it necessarily. So this is where things like machine learning models come in, right? To organize that data on an ongoing basis, to provide a profile of you that both is intersectional and based on what you've told us, based on the clicks, the opens, the surveys, the giving, the event tenants, like all the things we already have, right? Plus whatever we buy. And then that same machine learning model then also then scoops out everybody else who shares attributes with that person they built a profile on. So then you have lookalike profiles of all of those folks, and then you attach to that a generative AI tool and large language models to look at the websites, look at the materials, to build content based on those individualized profiles. And that is a daily process of updating, right? So like that, they're updating the profile. The profile is feeding into the generative model. The generative model then is like searching the website to build out like, how do I talk to you differently, so that every individual has unique content built to them. And then the branches from that, right? You can go to, when you show up to the website, right? And you log in, or we identify you through a pixel or something like that. Like, what's on there is based on your profile, because funds are associated with the profile that you've been created, right? So then all of a sudden we're starting to really be able to reflect how we listen to you, and think about how that changes the nature of an engagement event, or the nature of a direct mail or direct marketing solicitation, or the nature of a gift officer outreach, or it create this evolution in the business that puts us up to speed with the rest of the
Right.
world, but
You just
also
described what the for-profit world does every day, right? Exactly. Right.
yeah, and higher ed is terrible at this.
Yeah.
And so so that's where that is the model that I have been working hard to convince Berkeley to get into. And I've got it into our IT strategic plan, and I got it into our pipeline health strategic plan, and I actually got it into our DIBJ strategic plan as a vision for how the future should look. So trying to socialize that as a reality, that because so often we start, particularly in higher ed, we live in this space of culture of scarcity instead of culture of abundance. And so trying to have a little more abundant kind of perspective about it to solve some of the scarcity problems.
Mm. I love the
Where, and I'm sure there's a lot of schools out there or people listening that's like, if I use the word data lake, people's eyes are going to cross immediately, and like we're just
Yeah.
going to throw up our hands. But that's it. Like that is the way that you are going to be able to personalize your communications and send people communications based on what they're interested in, what they like.
Yeah.
Right.
And there are companies who'll give you free runs on their data lake product, right? Like there are companies that will let you use their basically get 6 months of access to that database resource to experiment with, to understand better, to learn about, right? They want to sell to us. You just have to be open to it. And so that's why, Ryan, that's why I explain data lake like I do, because I try to dumb it down to the most lowest possible level, because I have a very my hold on it is pretty loose. And so I've just kept saying to my IT people over again, I'm like, I'm describing it like this. Does that make sense? And they're like, that works out. And I'm like, cool. I'm going to just keep using it. And so, because you've got to break these concepts down for leadership. Most of our vice presidents, right, came out of a principal gifts kind of background. And so they have been living in a world of one-on-one relationships their entire career. And they understand the value of data, but they don't necessarily understand the challenges it takes to engage with 100,000, 500,000, 1 million people, and do it in high, tight resource and high speed. And so, so we have to take these complicated concepts and explain it to them in really, in ways that just make them more accessible. So that's what I try to do. I've been working on this white paper for Berkeley for about, I don't know, it feels like 12 years, but it's probably been 3 months. But just trying to explain how does this all fit together, and where does it go? So one day I'll finish it.
Yeah, the part of the challenge here, there are costs associated with this. Although you're right, vendors are willing to
Always
experiment.
Yep.
There is the data security issue that often prevents, especially a conservative institution that does not want to take a risk around data. I'm talking about data conservative approach. You also have the I don't want to be first and make the mistake reality, right? And so if you're listening to this and your eyes crossed, your head exploded when Howard was explaining that concept, never happened at my place kind of notion. I think the Cal Berkeleys of the world are going to be the ones that pioneer this kind of thinking and normalize it and streamline it and package it in such a way that a vendor can bring it to the masses and say, here's how we're going to do it at fill in the blank institution. So while you may kind of go, whoa, I don't have those resources, Howards of the world at the Cal Berkeleys of the world are going to lead the charge on this one. It's going to hit you eventually.
And there's things that you can do now, right? Even if I don't have the technology now. I'm pitching an idea, I'm working hard to make it happen. But in the meantime, we are pumping out, we're doing, everything's got a survey attached to it that's an interest-based survey. Our receipts have that into it. We are basically trying to collect data in every pathway we possibly can, and trying to make sure we're ingesting all the data, right? Even if you can't use it yet, just capture the data. Start with having the data ready so that day comes, you are prepared. And because then it gets there faster. And so, and not surprisingly, Chris, I am super comfortable with taking the risk and being first, because
I'm not surprised.
The industry needs you to be, right? I mean, we need you to be the one running down the runway now and tell us all how to do it. Right.
If it's not going to be me, I don't know who it's going to be.
Yeah, right. I have one more question back to the R&L report you did, and then Ryan, let's jump to our Friday cheers so we get that in. I know we're closing in on time here. One of the things that came out was that that alumni connection and satisfaction with alma mater is also on decline. What's going on there? What's underneath that? What's your take on it? And
it's
is it bandwidth? Is it
this
bandwidth?
I don't know. I mean, so I'm excited for a year two because we're gonna have some better data tools this time because we didn't have any open-ended questions, and so we didn't get to some of the underlying kind of trends as far as that. And I'm excited 'cause I want to actually incorporate some of that. And so what I suspect is some of that is related to some of the COVID classes and the distance learning and remote learning. And right, like I think if you look at that chart, I'm seeing in my head, and there's this like swoop that happens, right, where it kind of
Right.
like has this flip. Pretty helpful for the audience for me to kind of go, how's this flip? But like if you look at that kind of timeline, right, that it is like in the last like 5 to 7 years. And so you have generational change as an impact of it. Are we talking to the rising generation the right way? You have the COVID kind of experience and how that changed not only the nature of their experience, but the nature of how we work, right? And I think you also have this kind of rise of distrust in institutions that's happening societally, right? We have a real anti-intellectualism movement right now. We have a real, like, strong distrust of any institution, whether it be higher ed or government. It all kind of coincides. And so, the reality of our work is that we're fighting the prevailing winds of society, not just the winds of what we are doing wrong. And so, you know, all the things I talk about are things that are in our control versus what's not our control. I talk about this sometimes as staff and people about um, advancement staff who get very like, we got to improve the student experience. I'm like, not our job. We actually have no control on that. I'm not a student affairs professional. If you are, that's awesome, but we're not. What we can do is we can build trust in the philanthropic process. We can build trust in the experience they have in making gifts and trusting that when they make a gift, it goes to the place they want it to. And that's why we're very focused on getting students involved with Big Give and Giving Day. We view that as an experiential learning process instead of a giving process, right? Like, how do we teach them? I always joke about like the Schoolhouse Rocks, like the little bill, like how does a bill become a law, right? Like yeah. How does a gift get to me, right? Like it goes through, and there's this nice man who makes sure the gift is right and makes sure it goes to the right place, and then it goes to this person over here who makes sure it goes into your fund, and you get to spend it with these rules, right? Like, how do we build that trusting relationship with the system? Because it isn't really in our capacity in some ways to build a trusting relationship with the institution. Like we have limits. We can encourage, but some things are out of our control, and we've got to also acknowledge that too.
Awesome. Well, let's wrap things up for today's
Yep.
show with our Friday Cheers section. We try to have a conclusion of each of our shows, or maybe we are thinking about other things in our lives, books, movies, articles we've read, things that have got us thinking on this particular morning or afternoon, depending on where you live. And doesn't have to be advancement related, could be. But Howard, what is your Friday Cheers?
So I wasn't really sure where we were going with this, but I have this bowling pin. And I've had this
This
bowling
is
pin on
already
my
great.
desk.
It's already
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. So I've had this bowling pin on my desk since I've graduated college. And I stole it from my brother. My brother's 11 years older than me, and he took it from a bowling alley for some reason at some point. But my brother showed me the value of higher education and the transformational value of what it could be. And it is at the root of what I do, is to create space for others to have that transformational experience. And so I've literally had the bowling pin on every desk I've had since I was 22 years old. Because it is part, I think, and kind of the like bigger message in that is like always making sure we're connecting back to our why.
Yeah. It's a
If
great
there's not
reminder.
joy in what we're doing, why are we doing it? So
Friday Cheers
my Friday
always
Cheers.
made better by props. We like props.
Love it.
Yeah.
I like a
How about you,
prop.
Chris? What's your Friday Cheers?
Mine is a little bit mundane, on the mundane side, nothing to do with advancement. Having gone through a harrowing week of travel, I have 4 travel tips and pet peeves that I want to vent about just first. I'll do them quickly. All right. So
Excellent.
first, let's start with the security line. When you're going through the security line, get your shit together so that you go through quickly. Don't start it when you get up there to start pulling stuff out. Do it when you're waiting in line so that you just hand your thing, boom, you go through. Number 1. Number 2, when you're boarding the plane, boarding group number, whatever, don't carry a cup of coffee with you and be on the phone. Spill it out, throw it away, hang up the call, board the plane, get in your seat and shut up. That's how it should work. And when you're on the plane, and when you're sitting in the terminal too, on the plane, even more important though, There is no speakerphones, television watching, cartoons on if you're a
Oh
kid.
man.
Put on headphones. It's ridiculous. If everybody on the plane had their speakerphone on, it would be complete chaos. Turn off your freaking phone. All right. My last one is when I knew Ryan would laugh at this one. My last one is, this is more for the airlines themselves. When you are on a flight that gets canceled, sometimes you've waited for 4 hours and you've boarded and reboarded and deplaned all that stuff, and they cancel the flight. Yelling at the flight attendant and the pilots is not going to do any good. It's not their fault.
Wow.
Right? Just get off the plane and figure out a plan B. All right. That's my rant. That's my Friday cheers, Ryan.
I just want you to know that has a very old man on the front porch. Get off my lawn.
Get off my
vibe.
grass.
Very like, what are you doing there, kids? Off the lawn. I love it. I agree with all of those, by the way.
And just in my flight from Dallas to El Paso this week, a woman in the front row, one in front of me, had someone on speakerphone, and she was trying to talk about her delay. And she was mumbling into the phone because she didn't want to talk too loud. And we heard the person that she was talking to say, "You sound drunk or something." Right. And so like everybody in like a 3-seat radius was laughing at this woman because she sounded drunk, apparently. All right. My Friday cheers is I try to look for interesting examples of the word alumni used in other contexts and other situations. And I found this really interesting article from an NPR site in Oklahoma, where they were talking about the fact that 31% of youth who grow up in foster homes at 17, when they are graduating out of the program and they become alumni of foster care, they become homeless by the age of 19.
What's the percentage? 31?
31% of youth that graduate from foster care become homeless by the time that they're 19. And there's this really interesting nonprofit in Oklahoma City called Pivot. And what they're doing is they are fundraising and developing tiny houses for specifically for the graduates of these foster care programs. And the article was talking about how they just built 28 tiny homes that are specifically catering towards 17 to 24-year-old alumni of foster care scenarios, that they've really trying to make an impact on that and make sure that there's this smooth transition from the program to their lives on their own. And I just thought it's really an interesting sort of example of a social good organization tackling a problem of and sort of the word alumni coming up in a different way. All right, let's wrap things up for today. Thank you so much to Howard Heevner for joining us, and it's great to have you as part of the team.
Thank you, man.
Chris, I will see you Sunday evening at Nobu, and
we'll see Howard too. He's joining us.
Oh, is Howard going to have Nobu with us? Bonus.
Yes.
I got two positive responses back from clients that are going to be joining us too, Ryan. I'm very excited about.
Okay. All right. Well, that sounds good. And then we'll pick up with Alumless on Monday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern, live from the main stage. So thank you for everybody for listening and making us part of your routine. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.